Welcome to Break Free and Trust, a redesign for living. Join me, Chris.
And me, Jacqueline, for real conversations about life, death, and everything in between.
Learn to connect with your intrinsic power to grow and heal, how to laugh at your own humanness and not take life too seriously.
Through healthy conversations between the feminine and masculine, you learn how to harness the power of relationship and the mirror to befriend your shadow and to trust that any obstacle that gets in your way is there to help you grow.
Together, working at a practical level, you learn to trust that everything that is happening is for you, your growth, and ultimate freedom.
Our circumstances don't matter. It's only how we relate to them that does.
Get ready to befriend the wisdom of your body and the power of your mind.
Break Free and Trust starts now.
Welcome to Break Free and Trust, a redesign for living. I'm Chris.
And I'm Jacqueline.
And in this episode, Jacqueline and I are going to explore relationship dynamics. In our professional capacity as counselors, coaches, and mentors, we're exposed to a wide variety of challenges our clients bring to us with respect to relationships with their partners, their children, employers, everyone for that matter. What are some of the common factors that underlie these challenges? How do these challenges play out in different types of relationship? And how can we empower ourselves to face these challenges with an open mind and an open heart? We're going to explore this and much, much more in this episode. So Jacqueline, I mentioned in our professional capacity, we're presented with all sorts of relationship challenges from our clients, and they're all over the place in terms of different people and different scenarios. But you've been in this field quite a bit longer than I have, so maybe a good place to start is with you. What are some of the common factors that you see with your clients that bring forward relationship challenges?
So interesting, because I think that in many ways, our professional capacities are almost irrelevant in this because our personal experiences are equally relevant. And now that we're actually traveling with family, lots of family right now, I would say that I'm going to answer that question from this capacity first, because okay. I watched the very thing that we talk about all the time play out for me today, which is that regardless of what it is, what relationship we're speaking about, what dynamic we're speaking about, primarily the focus for all of us needs to be on regulating our own nervous systems. Mm-hmm. Because inevitably, the moment that we get triggered in relationship, which is the most likely place for us to get triggered, our nervous systems go into a state of arousal, hyperarousal, and we move into reactivity. And as soon as that happens, there's somebody to blame, there's somebody to attack, there's an ego to defend, and we're warring with each other. And what's actually happening is each one of us is trying in those moments to regulate our own nervous systems or to offset the discomfort that's happening from a nervous system that's been triggered. And so if I step back or actually step forward, I'll say to you that, one of the things I noticed today, we're in a house with like 16 people, was that I noticed that I started to get triggered, which meant that I started to get reactive and I started to feel quite defensive. Mm-hmm. And in that, my witness or observer came online and went, oh, you need to do something to spend some time by yourself to be able to self-regulate so that this doesn't spill out into all of your relationships. And so I went for a long walk and came back and felt much better. And so, again, to reiterate what I just spoke is that I think above and beyond everything else, the first step in relationship dynamics is to recognize that this isn't about the other person. Another person ultimately is a beautiful mirror for us. What we need to do is step into personal responsibility to be able to regulate our own nervous systems so that we can step into relationship with personal responsibility and not in a victim hero, rescuer, blame cycle, like we spoke about in a previous podcast, because that just creates drama. And we, as we spoke about in that episode, the drama triangle in and of itself is a triangle that prevents any creativity or forward movement from happening. It's like quicksand. Did I answer your question?
It does in a sense, but I'm not going to let you off the hook. So you described conflict arises, and we're always in conflict with everyone around us in some form or another. We get triggered. That trigger probably has something to do with us. And if we can regulate our central nervous system, we can find a way out of it. In a sense, what you're saying, that does actually involve the other person. It's a you on you thing.
Yeah.
I would say you're actually quite skillful at that as someone who's been practicing this.
Maybe a little less skillful with family, but yeah.
Yeah, there are hardest challenges. I want to come back to that, what I said earlier, that question I asked earlier. For maybe the folks who are less skillful at it and seeking help, and they're coming to a therapist or coach, a trusted friend, sort of at their wit's end with a relationship problem. Is there sort of a common theme, common factor that you see in that?
100%. And that comes to what I was speaking about at the very end. What we get presented with most often is the ways in which people are unhappy in their relationships. And that unhappiness is almost always presented in a way that blames the other person for the state of the relationship. Which is why I brought up the drama triangle. But let me take a step back again and speak to what I was speaking about in terms of our nervous systems. It is a very natural behavior in the presence of something that makes us feel unhappy, dysregulated, triggered, to offset the upset by blaming or attacking somebody else. Because in that moment, what happens for people is that we don't know what to do with the energy that's showing up in our bodies. And when we're not able to step in and be an observer or a witness of ourselves and be able to actually take a step back and self-regulate and then come forward, is that we need to discharge that energy somehow. And we're not going to look at ourselves in the mirror most naturally in that moment. What we're going to do is point a finger outward so that I can take my attention off of the discomfort in me and make it about something that you're doing wrong. Because if I can do that, then it's no longer my problem, it's yours.
So what I'm hearing there, what I pull of that is there's a common theme is a blame victim cycle.
100%.
And you mentioned the drama triangle a couple of times, and I think that's really relevant. Can you give a quick synopsis of what the drama triangle is, just for those listeners that didn't hear our episode on the drama triangle, which you can find?
Yeah, 100%. And I think that you'd be smart if it's something that really interests you to go back and to listen to that episode, because we really described it in great detail. The drama triangle is a triangle that often exists in relationships, and it's a triangle that includes a victim, a rescuer, and a persecutor. So there's somebody who is, well, that's the triangle. I think maybe there's more you want to say about it, but what I will say to it in terms of the dynamic that exists is that in each of those roles, whether you're victim, persecutor, or rescuer, there's no power. It's a triangle of powerlessness. And it's powerlessness because everything is projected outward, which means that each person in that triangle has no capacity to actually create any change, because it's always somebody else's fault.
Right. Yeah. It's that falling in that victim mentality. This is happening to me. I'm going to blame this person that I'm going to label as the villain or the persecutor. And it actually might be my spouse. It might be my child, it might be my parent, it might be my employer. And it's a place of powerlessness, because this person's doing this to me and they need to change, or else my circumstances aren't going to get better. And in that state of powerlessness, I'm going to sit back and look for perhaps a rescuer to come and save me.
Yep. And so when these roles exist within relationship, one, we tend to get used to a certain role and play it out quite consistently. But we end up in a situation where relationship dynamics don't actually look like a dynamic. It looks like quicksand where we're stuck. And what we want to actually move toward is, how can we become personally responsible in our relationships to affect the kind of change that we're seeking, not by looking outside, but actually by looking inside? Because any discomfort that each one of us has in relationship is almost always driven by something that's not shifting within us. And it's much easier to look outside to create blame than it is to actually look inside and figure out what stories we're carrying, what beliefs we have that are actually in the way of us self-actualizing. I mean, there's a reason, they say that relationship is the greatest form of yoga. And it's also the most challenging. Because in essence, relationship is an opportunity for us to look inside. Relationship is a mirror for us to be able to see ourselves more than anything.
I want to come back to that. That mirror is a very, very important thing. And I think we can go very deep on that. Before we jump into the mirror, you know what I'm going to ask you?
You don't
So
actually.
do you have a practical example or a stylized example of this type of relationship playing out between, I don't know, a parent and a child, or a romantic relationship or something? Put more descriptive for our audience.
You know what? You ask me those questions all the time, but you're always so much better at being able to give practical examples. So can I deflect that back on you and ask you that question?
You can. And it's actually, it's relevant for me in the sense that this is a theme that comes up an awful lot in my own practice. All people come to me for like a wide variety of reasons for coaching, but somewhere always at the top of the list that relationship creeps up, whether it's a spouse, whether it's an employer, whether it's a child. Relationships always like top one or two. And I would say that the common factor is what you've already articulated. It's, the person will come sit with me and I'll ask about the relationship, and it's only if so-and-so would do this, only if so-and-so would do that. They don't value me, my needs aren't being met. It's a whole external looking at the spouse. So like a husband coming in and having issues with the marriage, but what he'll dump on my lap is all the things that he perceives as being wrong with his wife. She's not fitting the image or the expectations of what he thinks he should be. And as a result, they're feeling victimized and can't do anything right. That's sort of the classic example. And it's very almost sort of cookie cutter in a way, but that's where it starts. And so very much, as you talk about, it's that victim. I'm a victim. I'm blaming this. I'm in this thing because we're married. Now, I also going to point out the common theme is there's a lot of love, because this person, of course, is here with a professional trying to get some help because he's trying to figure out a way to resolve this because he loves his wife deeply. So that factor's there too. But it's the victim blame dynamic.
You're quite skillful at being able to actually ask the question of, if your wife was here sitting with me, how do you think she would describe this dynamic? And immediately you have the capacity of being able to actually get that individual out of the mindset that they're in and into a different one, where you're holding the relationship as a whole and not just the individual that's showing.
Yeah. And it's funny because it can be a mic drop moment when I ask that question, because suddenly it's like, I actually haven't looked at myself through my wife. I have not stood in my spouse's shoes and looked at myself. I've actually not gone through that exercise, and things start to look a lot different, and it creates an opening. And ultimately what the idea is to, you're in this victim mentality. You've been in this blame cycle for however long it's been. You tried that, you probably exhausted it. It hasn't worked very well. Maybe try something different besides the drama triangle. Maybe move into the seat of creation and take control of what it is that you do have control over. It's not, and here's like the Cole's Notes version of the hint. It's not what your partner's doing, what they're feeling, and how you think they should be. You don't have any control over that. What you do have control over is how you're going to show up. And and the ability to look at some of the shortcomings that you may have in this relationships and the things that you're able to change within yourself. I would like to say you have a tremendous amount of agency on those things, but it's the last place that anyone wants to look.
Well, and we talk about going to therapists or coaches or mentors for help, but when the help actually looks like, are you ready to take a good look in the mirror? Most people want to turn the other way. And you said something there that I was thinking about on my walk today, in reference to my own experience with family this morning, which is that at the end of the day, we look at relationships and we often think about, how can I meet another person's needs? How can I bend in order to meet them halfway? What do I need to sacrifice in order to ensure that they're getting their needs met? Or at least that's often from the people-pleasing harmony keeper side of me.
Yeah.
That's how I've approached relationship for a really long time. Until something really got me. And that is that, I mean, I can tell you a story from a long time ago, maybe, which creates some context for that. But we can come back to that. At the end of the day, there is one relationship that requires 100% of our attention, and that is the relationship that we have with ourselves. And it's incumbent upon us, as we're engaging with other people and with our environments, that we learn how to develop vibrational autonomy. And what I mean by that is, energetically, we take up space. And we are responsible. One of my dear friends and teachers used to talk about this with me a lot, is that we are responsible for 1 arm's length around our entire body. And that's it. And what I mean by that is, I'm responsible for ensuring that I am vibrationally clean. And it is incumbent upon me not to not invade somebody else's energetic field, and to ensure that my energetic field isn't invaded by another person. So those words are kind of complicated, and I'll say it this way. If I'm sitting here and I'm doing my work, and in the other room, there's a conversation that's going on, and somebody's really struggling, my responsibility first is to ensure that I'm taking care of what's going on within my field, not to go off to then think that I'm able to solve whatever's going on out there. When I can hold that kind of vibrational autonomy, what actually happens is that I can engage as a whole person with you, let's just say sitting here, without needing to fix you, change you, alter you in any way, or wish you were otherwise. The only person that I'm responsible for is me. And too often, we converge with each other, we enmesh with each other, and we do it in a way that we think is love. We think it's kindness. We think it's compassion, but actually, we're putting ourselves in places we're not meant to be. I don't know if that was very clear.
I think it was very clear. In a sense, there's an element of the rescuer node on the drama triangle. We're coming in a sense, we're coming in trying to fix, we're trying to like solve what we perceive as a problem with the victim, when in fact it might be, that's their own path. We're just having a reaction to it, and it's us that thinks something needs to be solving, but it's not.
But it's not just the rescuer or the victim. It's also the persecutor and the judger. It's as soon as my judge shows up and I want to judge you, there's actually something that's uncomfortable within me that I need to look at.
Right.
But instead, it's a deflection. And so there's all of this, I would say, almost dirty energy going on between us. And I don't mean you and I, but sometimes you and I, but amongst us all socially, where it's like, instead of us each being within our own energetic bubbles, we're impinging on each other's bubbles. And in that, we actually create a lot of damage.
Yeah. And it's encroaching energetic fields is also, and there's that energetic perspective, but the way I see it as well, related to that, is there's an intellectual understanding that is complicated, but I want to share is that really think, what is it we know about the other person? We don't necessarily really know them. What we know is an image we have of that other person. And where has that image been created? Well, it's obviously been created in us. This image is emanated from our minds, from our experience, from our fears, from our limiting beliefs. And that's the projection that we put on the other person. And so what we're likely seeing in them is just, as we talked about earlier, it's mirroring back to us our own issues.
Mm-hmm. So what we love about them tends to be the things that we want more of in ourselves.
Yeah.
And the things we hate or are triggered by them or judge in them are the shadowy pieces in us that we're not willing to look at.
Yeah. And the shortcut in that is, instead of what we love about them, is what I love about my image of them. Mm-hmm. Because I don't actually know them, mm-hmm. In an objective way.
Can you say that even towards people that you're really close to?
Yeah, and I think you get to know them even more. But in some aspects, you're more likely to project your rejected parts of you and your shadow side onto them, because there's more comfort. When we're dealing in the workplace with people we don't know, we have our best mask putting forward, and so it may be likely we don't see as many faults, but boy, can we find the faults in our partners and our kids and the people we have the closest contact with. Again, that's also, we're letting our guard down a little bit, and we're projecting those parts of us that we may not even be aware of onto our partners.
And so when we do that and we see our clients come in with that, and those voices that come in to us in those moments tend to be quite loud. They tend to have been building for a long time. They tend to be full of resentment. Mm-hmm. Our jobs are to really listen to what's behind them with compassion, to recognize that there's pain and there's suffering there that each of our clients is unable in that moment to be able to see or to be with. And so projecting it outward is their way of being able to discharge energy they don't know what to do. And then our job ultimately is to turn them back inside, to get really curious about what parts of them are being triggered. But we can't do that before we've helped them to regulate their nervous systems.
Absolutely. And part of that, what just showed up for me as you're talking, is that I mentioned earlier, the reason they're seeing somebody is because there's love there. And again, these shifts of mindset, asking them, what would your partner say about you? But also, well, you've just told me all the things that are calling challenges or you resent about your partner. How about all the things you love about them? How about all the wonderful things? And that could start shifting a mindset and changing the nervous system from one of anger and resentment to one of love, in a sense. That's a part of it.
It's interesting. I think one of the things that really moves me quite a bit is being able to hold space for somebody to come in and speak their truth in the ugliest version of the truth they have to speak it in. And what I mean by that is, the things that we don't like to say out loud, the things that we keep to ourselves and ourselves alone, because God forbid we should ever share those words out loud. And to be able to create the space where there's no judgment, there's no reactivity, there's simply a container for those things to be spoken. That in and of itself is magic, because in being able to hold a nervous system a steady nervous system in the presence of that expression, something inevitably shifts. There's a downshifting in energy where all of a sudden, having spoken that and gotten it out without any reactivity, there's now an openness to be able to start to do some work.
And a big part of that, holding that space, I think, as we're sort of exploring this issue together, it's that non-judgmental space. This is how you see the world. This has been your experience in it. Okay, I'm not going to tell you you're wrong or reject that. That's from the place you're sitting in. Your subjective reality is this. Okay, let's get that out. But now we're going to change the observer. We're going to work on the observer, not the observed. Take a leap of faith that if you look inside and you change some of the things or look at some of the things you may not even understand about yourself, that I bet you how you perceive in the outside world will also change. Got to trust me on this one a little bit, but that's the way it's going to be. But I'm certainly not going to tell you that your subjective reality is wrong. Jung has there's this, many of his famous stories is he was talking to another psychiatrist about one of his clients that lives on the moon, and he interrupts Jung and he goes, no, he thinks he lives on the moon, and Jung goes, no, as far as he's concerned, he lives on the moon, and that's where our session starts, and that's where it ends. And I'm not here to tell him he's wrong. I'm just here to tell him to look at himself with the hopes of his subjective reality maybe shifts.
It's beautiful. Before we take a break, I just want to bring up a concept that you bring up all the time. And you use really beautiful words for it, which is that every projection, every reaction, every upset is just a cry for love. Mm. And when we can hold that space for the people that come to us, or we can hold that space for each other in relationship, then we have the capacity to be able to step back and begin to look at what's happening from a place of love versus one of fear and reactivity. So let's take a quick break, and then we'll come back and take that a little further. Welcome back, everybody. So just before the break, we were speaking about how every reaction is really ultimately just a cry for love. And it seems like a strange thing to say, right? When you're in the midst of somebody yelling at you at the table, or you're in the car and somebody screams, or there's all kinds of upset and grief that shows up. But the truth is that when we have, as long as we're living in a reactive body, it's really impossible to be able to see that what's being asked of us is to step into a place of acceptance, non-judgment, unconditional love for the people in our lives. But when we have the ability to develop a little bit, when we have the capacity to develop our observer and grow our witness consciousness, what we create is an opportunity to be able to experience ourselves in certain moments. And as we begin to watch and witness our own reactions, we begin to see that we have defensive postures designed to protect those parts of us that are very vulnerable. We have attacking postures that are designed to protect those parts of us that are very vulnerable. And ultimately, every time we get triggered, we are trying to protect or defend something. And once we've become a good enough observer of ourselves to be able to see these moments, we can develop some humility in these moments of interaction and begin to recognize that the same is true for the people that we're interacting with. And so it's in those moments of awareness that it's almost like we could push the pause button just for a second and be able to see this person that's screaming at us is saying, don't you see me? Can't you hear me? I need to be seen. Can you take a moment and see me? Can you hear me? Can you feel what I feel? And once we do that, everything kind of begins to fizzle out. It's almost like you've taken the air, the oxygen away from fire, and there's nothing left to blow. And when we can interact with each other in those places, we begin to raise the frequency of our interactions, and we step out of the world of those lower frequencies that Chris has spoken about a lot in previous episodes, which is Dr. Hawkins' work. And I'm going to turn that over to you so that I don't do what I do and bastardize concepts.
Let me bastardize the concept.
You can do that.
Yeah. We talked about, I think in multiple episodes, but the David Hawkins frequency of consciousness is a tool that, I probably think about it 10 times a day with my clients, but also for myself. And what he's done is it's very related to the idea of a quantum world and the quantum field, in that everything in our universe has a vibration and a frequency. Solid objects vibrate differently than the air does. And what he's done is he's looked at emotions and emotional states, which, like everything else in the universe, also has a vibrational frequency and a wavelength. And he, through a process called kinesiology testing, he looked at the frequencies of different set of emotions. And I'm going to bastardize this, but I'll give you an idea. It starts at the bottom with shame, which is a very low vibration, moves up to guilt, and then into anger, into fear, and into desire, and into pride. And ultimately hits courage, which is considered the demarcation line of life empowering emotional states. And it moves up into acceptance, into willingness, and ultimately into joy and unconditional love, peace, and enlightenment. And why is this important? It's because once we can step into this observer mode that Jacqueline talked about, we can start to get better at saying, what is the emotional frequency? What is the emotional state that I am now buzzing at and projecting around me? Because if I believe I live in this, I live in a quantum world, which I do, whatever vibrational state I'm putting out there, I'm sort of calling it back into me through the cosmic law of reciprocity. I can struggle with this. I got that word right. Reciprocity, and that is, I firmly believe this as sort of a mantra of life. Whatever I'm putting out there in terms of my frequency, with a lag, the universe is going to return to me. And again, this is very much aligns with what we understand about quantum physics, in that there's no separation between the observer and the observed. If I am in a state of anger, I'm going to see an angry world. If I'm in a state of fear, I'm going to see a fearful world. If I am in a state of unconditional love, I am going to see a world full of unconditional love. And it's true. And this is one of the most critical things, that I bring to my own life and bring to, my own coaching practice, is really trying to understand these transitional states we can be in. And it's not to say that I don't get angry or I don't end up in shame or guilt at times. I just become more aware of it and saying, I don't want to be here. I don't want to be a victim. I don't want to be a persecutor. I don't want to be a rescuer. And I certainly don't want to walk around angry all the time. So what do I got to do to change that? Because I'm fully confident when I change it about myself, with a lag, my whole universe will change.
And it does. And it is with a lag. And that lag can be incredibly uncomfortable. But I think that's part of what develops grit, is that just because we've shifted our vibration doesn't mean that everybody else is going to shift along with us. What it means is that our perception of other people is going to shift. And as we shift our perception, we invite a different energy to step forward. We were just speaking about interactions and the observer and the witness. And what's really being asked for ultimately is a cry for love.
Mhm.
There's a model, which is kind of funny that I'm bringing up a model, but there's a model that was taught to me many years ago by a dear friend and mentor of mine, Michael Talbot Kelly. And it's called the ICU principle. And it's really simple. And I wish I had a graphic
It's
to show you right now.
you.
I
I
see
see
you.
you.
And it looks like a pyramid. And at the bottom of the pyramid is acknowledgement. So it's to say that I acknowledge your anger right now. I acknowledge your upset. I acknowledge your resentments, whatever they may be. And then it moves to attention. And I'm going to attend to you in this moment.
Mhm.
And then it moves into affection. And I'm going to meet you with love in this moment, with whatever it is you're presenting to me. And ultimately, what that leads to is acceptance. So in my presence, I can acknowledge, attend, meet you with affection, and ultimately accept the wholeness of who you are without making you bad because you're angry, you're hurting, you're resentful, you're whatever. And the only way that I can do that in my seat is if I am first doing that for myself, and I have the capacity to be able to regulate my own nervous system. Once I've done that, then in any interaction that I get into, I can begin to recognize that ultimately everybody is asking to be seen and met in a very similar way. Comes to this whole idea of radical acceptance. Because when we're in the presence of somebody who can meet us with that energetic, everything becomes possible because my need to defend or protect fall away. There's no need for it. And I'm left to actually to shed that energy.
Right. And it very relates in the sense that, to be able to do that, you have to be in a certain state of acceptance or willingness or love or joy or whatever it is to be able to hold that. And your central nervous system has to be there. And you've also had to done the work and had the awareness that that's where you want to be. And much like we've been talking about these stylized examples, when I'm sitting with someone I'm working with, and I'll ask them, after all you've described about your spouse or your employer, what emotional state do you think you're in right now? It's not love, and it's not acceptance, it's not willingness. So this hasn't worked for you. Let's try shifting yourself there. We'll see what happens. And virtually every time is that once the person has done that work, and it's not overnight work, it takes time, is that the response is, yeah, everything's changed. Not just my relationship, my job, my relationship with my kids, everything in my life, my health, it's all gotten better because I've actually changed my emotional state. And I just want to say one caveat here. I mean, there are relationship dynamics that are atypical, that there's abuse in it, there's safety issues. We're not suggesting this is a one type fits all thing. Those are different circumstances that warrant strong boundaries and maybe a different type of help. So I just wanted to throw that out there. So we're all being all airy fairy and lovey dovey in our approach to this.
100%. You just brought up a really interesting word though, which is boundaries. And you and I were speaking about this yesterday, and you brought up Brene Brown's work, which is often work I bring up, but she quotes a study that's been done of the most compassionate people in the world, and they all had only one thing in common. The one thing they all had in common was they had crystal clear boundaries, which comes back to this whole idea of vibrational autonomy.
Mm-hmm.
If I honor my boundaries and I honor what's okay for me, then there's no way for you to impinge upon that, because I get to choose whether it's okay for me or not. Now, let me take that a little bit further. Well, think about, well, maybe even take the hardest example, which Chris said yesterday. He asked me in a conversation if he could bring up the C word. I was like, what is the C word?
Should I say it?
You can.
Children.
Go for it.
Children.
Yeah, because they're like the perfect example of what loves to push our boundaries as far as they possibly can to get their needs met and what they want. And they're meant to do that. But we're also meant to meet them with clear boundaries, because when we do, we model for them how to assert their own boundaries.
And I just want to say, like, because we're getting into children, like, I just want to highlight the specialness of that relationship. Like in our romantic relationship or with an employer or with a friend, there's a ripcord we can pull. It's not easy, it's not painless, but we can. But our children are quite different. Like, ultimately, it's a weird relationship in the sense that they're 100% dependent on us from the born. But by some age of adulthood, they're meant to be independent and then ultimately interdependent. That's a harrowing ride to go through with all this stuff.
So hard.
And so this is some of the real challenges of what to do. We want the best for them. We watch them hurt themselves. We watch them make decisions we think are terrible. And we want to, like, we watch someone drown. We want to jump in the water with this drowning victim. And we're going to get drowned. And so what Jacqueline's talking about here with boundaries, it applies everywhere. Boy, it's really pertinent with our children.
Well, and for those of us that have children, it becomes an incredible opportunity, because our children actually become our very best teachers if we can hold them in that way and not take the stand that, we know everything and our children are here to learn from us, which, to be honest with you, I think is a crock, because I've learned more about myself through my failings with my children than I have through anything else. But you're right. There's a particularity about that relationship, which is there's a cord. There's a cord between us and our kids. And it's not a cord that we want to sever. It's a cord we want to honor. It's a cord we want to honor. But at the same point, it creates an opportunity for us to really practice honoring ourselves and that.
And unconditional love could look very different at different stages in that relationship with our children, right? It's like, and boundaries come into it ultimately.
So how do you manage? How do you manage challenging moments with our kids, as an example? When boundaries are pushed, when demands are made, and those demands feel out of whack or off-putting or like they're violating the boundary.
You're asking?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think what I've arrived at through many years of experience and not doing it well is ultimately that it's what we're talking about here. I ultimately, listen, our children have their own lives. They have their own karma. They have their own soul contract if they want to get there. I don't actually know what it is. They're, I use my language. They're also God's children too. I'm here to help raise them, and I'm here to help show the way for them. But ultimately, I don't have any control over them at the end of the day. What I do have control over, or try to have control over, is my own emotional state. And if I'm going to be any good to the people I love, I have a responsibility to manage that first and foremost. I have to have the boundaries in place, or the tactics in place that, for me anyways, allows me to try to come at everything from a place of unconditional love, which is my ideal, but at the very least, courage and acceptance. And so that becomes the litmus test when things happen. And it can even be little things where, I'm asked for a ride or something when I'm busy, and I stop and I think, I'm about to walk into a resentment territory with this because I think they can take the bus or something silly like that. I owe it to them to say no here and protect my vibrational frequency in this. And that's a simple example. The examples get much harder, but it's the same thing in practice. What is this doing to me?
But it's interesting when you speak that. Yeah. You're not just protecting your vibrational frequency. you're actually also stepping in and honoring the relationship, because by choosing what's right for you, you're actually not bringing resentment into the relationship,
Correct.
which ultimately is in service of everybody. So if we go back, I'm going to take us back to something that a teacher of mine once said to me, which I never really understood in the moment, but now it's a mantra for me, is as long as I do what's in service of me, everybody's served.
Yeah.
But the moment I violate me for another person, everybody's actually hurt by it. In the example you just gave, if you actually stepped in and you gave the ride, but you really didn't want to, the drive would be full of animosity and frustration. That animosity and frustration would be felt by one of our children. And the end result of that would be both of you are left in a really crappy position. Whereas by saying no in the first place, there might be a bit of a jarring, but the no is a no and everybody goes on and they're happy, right? And I think that one of the ways in which we really screw ourselves up with our kids is by thinking that our responsibility is to meet all of their needs, and that our responsibility, or their wants, I'll say, we are responsible for meeting their needs, but we're not responsible for meeting all of their wants, and we're not responsible for managing their nervous systems in the presence of not getting their wants met. We have to be okay being uncomfortable, that our kids are mad at us, or they hate us for a moment, or they're disappointed and upset. We live in a society that wants to make everything okay for everybody all the time. And the end result of that is that we're not giving our children the opportunities that they need to develop their own resilience and their grit and their capacity to be with discomfort and find a way through it. And so actually, while our children may be the toughest relationships that we have to work with this on, they're also the most powerful places to be able to model healthy nervous systems, healthy boundaries, and at the same time, unconditional.
Yeah. It's got me thinking about, and I'm going to share something about my own biological children here. And so I have not had direct contact with my three children since my alcoholic bottom. I think it was over 5.5 years ago. There's one-way communication, but it's not reciprocated now. They're not ready. They're in their healing process. And it's been a painful journey. There's tremendous sadness in there, but they have been, and I've been getting goosebumps saying this, my absolute greatest teachers, because they have taught me a form of unconditional love that I didn't know existed. They have taught me a form of love that I didn't know was out there, that I can sit in now. Ram Dass talks about this in terms of loving through missing, and the power of that you can unconditionally love someone that you're not physically around with just because they're there, just because they exist, just because I know they walk on this world and that they're part of me. And it's hard to say it. My love for them has grown deeper every single day. I don't take it for granted. And it has allowed me to love everybody more or less unconditionally at different stages, but I'm so much better at it. And I stay in this place of frequency. My kids taught me that. And I'm never learning that lesson if I haven't gone through this ordeal with my kids. So they are my best teachers. Maybe that was their soul contract, to be continued where it all ends up. But this is how it is.
And you see, I think what you're pointing at, amongst many, many things in there, is that where that started for you, where you had no capacity to affect change outside, you turned inside and you turned to God. And in doing so, developed a nervous system that could be in the presence of missing, of pain, of loss, and find a way to remain present and clear and connected. And from that place, you've had this capacity to be able to hold this with unconditional love. But it started by turning inward. You had an opportunity to project that out. And something inside of you knew that that wasn't actually going to get you anywhere good. You turned inward. And that, if I was, I would say that in the field of relationship, and I say field because relationship is a field, just like frequency creates a field. In the field of relationship, the beginning is within each one of us. It's not out there. So if you're struggling in a friendship, you're struggling with a sibling, with a parent, in a marriage, at work, and you want guidance, the first thing that you need to do is turn inward and begin to ask what it is that you can do for you. And when you don't know what you can do for you, you can lean in and ask a therapist, a coach, a mentor. You can move to prayer and look for where it is your world is reflecting back to you the very things that are needing to shift inside of you. And when you begin there, you're out of the drama triangle. You flipped the drama triangle on its head, and you get to become the coach. You get to become the creator. You get to tap into this natural creative intelligence that exists for all of us to create transformation. And it begins inside.
Yeah, beautifully said. And it took me back to this place I remember being in. I was like sitting in a river of shame and guilt and anger, mostly at myself and self-loathing. And it's like, I have a choice. I have a choice to sit here in my self-pity and be a victim to life and circumstances and all these other things. Or I can choose to do the work to try to change that internally. No one's coming to rescue me. No one's going to do it for me. But if I do this, I don't know why I had the grace to know that if I did this, my life would change. But that grace showed up when it needed to show up. I still remember the knowing or the voice in my head that morning where it just said, let go, surrender. You're going to be okay. Do the work. And I work with, not surprisingly, a collection of clients have found me that are men that are estranged from their children, that are looking for guidance, and they're all doing the same thing. They're all doing the work on themselves, and their lives are all changing. And it's as Jacqueline pointed out, we're a field, and they're blown away with the very first thing I say to them. The very first homework assignment I give them is that I want you to go home, and I want you to pray for your ex-wife. I want you to pray for her. I want you to pray that she has all the happiness in the world. And that wasn't their first instinct. But that's the start of it all. That's the start of unconditional love. Is when we start affecting the field with our thoughts, with our vibration, and the way we see other people.
Yeah, so I think in the end, his story is a big one, but ultimately Chris's story really comes down to choosing life and choosing to live as unconditional love. First for self. And once that happens, the capacity to love everybody around you, no matter how they show up, becomes possible.
We are love. We come from love and are trying to return love. And if you can just remember those little things in your next action you take, all your relationships will change in ways that are miraculous. And I think with that, we'll close. Thanks for being with us today.
See you in a couple of weeks.
You've been listening to me, Chris.
And me, Jacqueline, on Break Free and Trust, a redesign for living.
Tune in every second and fourth Monday at 3 p.m. on Transformation Talk Radio for more real conversations about life, death, and everything in between.
Learn to connect with your intrinsic power to grow and heal, how to laugh at your own humanness and not take life too seriously.
Through healthy conversations between the feminine and the masculine, you will learn how to harness the power of relationship and the mirror to befriend your shadow, and to trust that any obstacle that gets in your way is there to help you grow.
For more information or to connect with us personally, visit theway-healing.com. That's theway-healing.com.